Hello, Millwall fans. Paul Eiffel here. It's time for Chat with Chaps.
Hello, Millwall fans, and welcome back to another episode of Chat with Chaps. This is a Chaps Reacts video where we are reacting to the news that broke in the last 24 hours that Sheffield United are hot on the heels of Japhet Tanganga with talks ongoing with the club. In order to discuss the news that we have kind of been dreading all summer but also braced for, I have got two very special guests. First of all, fresh off his phone in the week, we welcome Mr. Phil Clarke to the show. Phil, how you doing, mate?
Really well, thanks. Thanks for inviting me along. It's very kind to have the opportunity to talk about this.
Yeah, it's a big subject, so we bring out the big dogs. The other big dog we've got today is the one and only Dan Marsh. How you doing, Dan?
Hi, yeah, good, Chris. Thanks, mate. Like Phil says, thanks for having us on. Looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, I mean, I am. I'm not, right? I won't lie. It's I've made no secret that Mr. Tanganga is my favourite player. But look, I will start straight away by essentially bringing the listeners up to speed in terms of what we have heard so far. So Luca Bendoni, obviously friend of the show, he was on last summer when he broke the news that Mr. Tanganga was signing for us. Yesterday said that Sheffield United are making headway in their desire to sign Japhet Tanganga, with conversations going back and forward with the club in order to bring him to Bramall Lane. And he quoted a number of north of around £5 million. So that is obviously where that number ends up. We don't know, but that's kind of the number, and that's the latest. Sheffield United obviously have a little bit of money because of the sale of Sousa and, of course, Ahmed Hodjovic, who they'll be looking to replace. Also looking to bring in Ben Godfrey and Ben Mee. So a lot of transfer business there for the Blaze fans. I'm going to ask you both a question straight off the bat. I'll come to you first, Dan. If it is north of £5 million, do you sell him or do you not?
Yeah, I'd probably be in the camp of sell. Obviously, no club wants to lose their best players, and obviously we've all got high expectations and hopes of the season, and losing Japhet would be a blow to those hopes. But what you've got to look at is the overall picture. So obviously the alternative is in 12 months time, 11 months, whatever it is, he could walk away for free. The elephant in the room is that Premier League release clause. So it's not even a case of where you can do a Jed Wallace and you can sort of gamble and, we'll turn down the money, we'll keep Japhet, hope that gets us to the Premier League, and you obviously recoup the money that way. But who's to say that tomorrow or on deadline day or the day before the Premier League club doesn't come in and pick him up for what is relatively peanuts for a player of his talent. So that for me would probably be the worst option. I think the option on the table with the figures sort of mentioned would probably be my preference, but with the caveat of it's always disappointing to sell a good player or lose a good player, but that is the direction we're going in. There's going to be we're going to find good players and we're going to sell them, and hopefully we're going to replace them with those funds. So that's where I probably am on it.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And Phil, your point of view on the same question?
Do we sell him? Wow. I think for the numbers they're talking about, you probably have to go back to the beginning and think, how did we get Japhet Tanganga in the first place? And he came to us from a Premier League club, having played in the Champions League with a sort of faulted Premier League career and a couple of injuries, with the clear intention that he wanted to re-establish himself and then move on. The release fee was there to allow that to happen. So I think if the numbers are right, you've probably got to honour the mutual agreement that would have been made between the player and the club. And ultimately, it's really about what comes next. It's about what we do next. But yeah, I think I know there'll be a lot of emotion about selling him to a rival, keep him. But ultimately, this is a family that put a huge amount of money into the club continually. To ask them to turn down 4, 5, 6 million quid to keep a player who basically won't want to be here would be the wrong decision, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I think my gut reaction as a Millwall fan, and I can already hear people screaming at the screen right now, is why would you want to sell your arguably best player or best players? But I think you have to look bigger picture, right? You have to look at the fact that you've got a player that, let's be honest, I think towards the back end of last season and arguably the start of this season, I think he was good at Norwich, but has he been the same player? Could he be distracted? And obviously the caveats that you mentioned around how we could walk away for less money or for free in the not too distant future. So you've got to put all those elements into a pot. The thing that surprises me, though, again, I'd love to get both of your opinions. Phil, I'll come to you first, is Sheffield United, right? So in my opinion, I don't think if we keep Jaff and add a few more bodies, I don't think they're better equipped to go up than we are. So, what is it from Japhet's point of view? Because there's no smoke without fire, right? That potentially appeals to Japhet for Sheffield United, Phil?
Reportedly, he's our highest paid player. And, that's, I've got a rough idea what the numbers are, but, I don't know specifically, so I won't mention them. But, it's a lot of dough. You're probably looking at, for us, without a doubt, our highest ever paid player. Going to Sheffield United, I think he could probably be adding 10, 15 grand a week on top of that. Plus, ultimately, he will believe that, that they have a bigger platform for success than we do, even though we won't agree with that. And, ultimately 10 or 15 grand a week is 700 grand a year, 4-year deal, 2-3 million quid, bonuses, fees, and all the rest of it. I can see why it might be attractive in some degree, even if, we don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, the Sheffield United obviously been a bit of a yo-yo club with the Premier League, right? I think they've had a really underwhelming start. Ruben Selles, has got mixed reviews, shall we say? Dan, your perspective on Sheffield United as a club and a potential, Premier League club, because ultimately that's where Japhet wants to be. And do you think Sheffield United, the club that could potentially offer him that? And I guess any perspective on selling him to a rival, especially it's coincidental that obviously we play them on Saturday. Yeah,
potentially. I mean, as Phil said, platform is probably quite a good way to put it. Looking at their recent history and stuff, and even for this level, I think if you were going to move to a championship club, they would probably be up there in terms of being an attractive option. I rate the manager. I mean, this might come across a bit weird after, I imagine there's a fair bit of negativity there after losing their opening 2 games, but, I believe they'll be up there. I'm not saying I think they've got a better chance of promotion than us or reaching the top 6, but, you would expect them to be up there. You can't win the league in August. You can certainly lose it. So, they don't want to give themselves too much chasing to do. And, I think that's reflected by their business. Like Lucas said, they're also trying to bring in Ben Godfrey. There's been talk of Ben Mee as well. So they're obviously, making a real push. I know there's been a lot made of their recruitment strategy, which is, eyebrow raising, depending on what side of the fence you're on. But in terms of us as a rival, yeah, that does sour it a little bit. But again, I think it comes back down to the figures. I just think, is it, does anybody want to do it? Probably not. But do people accept this the right option? I think probably.
Yeah.
And you just have to hope that we can go and replace him. He's been very, very good. He's exceptional last season. I don't think anybody particularly had their finest hour in our most recent game, but in Norwich, I thought him and Cooper were very good, very good. A good partnership. So yeah, it would be a shame, but Sheffield United are a club you'd expect to be up there. They're a big club, and I think they're probably an attractive option for people who are looking at that to get to a Premier League. If they're not going to go up, they're going to be there or thereabouts.
Yeah, I think that for me, it boils down to the commercial element of the club. Do you sell him to, I don't know, say Wolves for 1.5 million, or do you sell him to a rival in the Championship for 5, 6, 7, 8 million? And as much as it's not ideal, I think you have to look at how we would then reinvest that money and what we would need to do to the squad. I think let's talk about that then now. So I think if we isolate Middlesbrough, I personally believe that Tristan Crammer, despite him being a centre-back and obviously him telling us that he prefers to play centre-back, I believe he's established himself to be a very competent right-back, right wing-back in the system that Alex Neil plays. So the question is, do we now move Tristan back to centre-back if Tanganga goes and we buy a right-back, right wing-back? People talk about Norton Cuffy. It's not going to happen. I think we need to, whilst it'd be brilliant, it's not going to happen. Or do we keep Tristan out there and bring in a centre-back? What would, starting with yourself, Phil, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had this debate with people on different social media platforms about Tristan. A lot of people have been saying for a while, we've got to go and sign a dedicated right back. And the way I would look at it is there are probably 5, maybe 6 teams in the division that are going to cause him a lot of trouble as a fullback. So you could go out there and spend 4 or 5 million quid getting a better right back that will probably still get done in 2 or 3 games. So really what you're doing is spending 3, 4, 5 million quid to probably improve the side over maybe 2 or 3 games a season. Because the majority of games, he's proved to be more than competent and capable at right back and had really good numbers offensively. But you've also got to think last season, he spent most of the season with Honeyman or who else was in front of him for quite a while? Maybe Watmore was in front of him for a few games. I can't remember now. He had basically, he didn't have Negley in front of him, and that's not a criticism. It's just the fact they haven't really formed a partnership yet. They played for a couple of games. It was pretty obvious on Saturday they haven't quite worked out how they're going to link up and help each other, and that left him really exposed. So, to answer the question, I think we definitely would need to buy another centre back. But I also think we should be looking at another right back now anyway. I've changed my opinion on that, not necessarily to replace Tristan, but more the fact that players like Ryan Leonard or possibly even Wes Harding, they can't play the role in the same way. And that fullback role is so crucial to the way we're set up. I don't think you can risk just having one player who can play the way we need to play.
Yeah. Agree, and obviously we'll touch on this in a minute in terms of actually the amount of business we probably still need to do, which obviously only gets added to if Japhet does go. Dan, what's your opinion on where, if you had to, obviously ideally we'd want both. We've said on this channel all summer we want a attacking right back. We said it right, in June when we did our wish list. But what's your perspective on if Japhet does go? Where would you spend the money? Would you bring in a centre back or right back?
Depends on who's available, isn't it? Depends on who they're looking at. I mean, what I would say is people have been, asking for an attacking right back. I'd agree with Phil. I think we've already got one. I think when you think back to, obviously Norwich game was very, very good. I think back to last season, even I think the QPR game was one that stood out, sort of bombing up and down, and I don't think you would tell from watching Tristan Crammer play that he's not a natural right back. I would not be in a big rush to move him inside, personally. Like I say, again, it goes back to who the options are of bringing in. But personally, I think I'd be more than happy keeping Tristan where he is and bringing in another option. I think Phil again makes a good point in terms of, if that winger is going to tuck in on the right, you need an outlet at right back, coming up and down. Does Ryan Leonard offer us what, although he's a very good right back and he has been in seasons past, does he offer the same attributes that Tristan offers us in that position with how Alex wants to play, which is the crucial thing? You can't have your right winger tucking in like Negley's going to do, like others have done. I think Bangura Williams has played there last season. You need an outlet. For me, Tristan is that. I wouldn't be rushing to change that. but a lot will depend on the market, as you touched on. I know the club spoke about the possibility of the fans forum of if Japhet goes. Obviously, there are plans in place. It depends. I think there's 11 days left of the window. That
And a lot
will
of
have
business still need to be done, right?
exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the system Alex Neil plays is essentially to deploy your 10 on the right midfield, right? Which is why we see Negley play there, Reyes play there, and then when Kundal comes on, more often than not, that's where he plays, right? So that's kind of the system that we play. I wonder whether there is an opportunity to spend the money on a centre back, but bring in like a Zach Sturge style loan, like a young player that offers something different, that with a view to seeing how he progresses and there'd be a permanent. I wouldn't mind that so much, but I think not addressing it at all would be a problem. So let's talk a bit about then, who would we go out and replace Japhet with? Again, making the assumption that he does move on. I'm going to just throw some names out there just purely because they've been mentioned on social media, in forums and conversations. So the three that I'll throw out there to you is Caleb Taylor from West Brom. I think that's been a name that's been mentioned. Matty Pollock of Watford has been mentioned on a few forums. I don't know if there's anything in that one. And then finally, Alfie Gilchrist, obviously at Chelsea, but incidentally was on loan at Sheffield United last season, is available. They haven't chosen to take that option and sign him, which I'm not sure what that says. But yeah, Phil, talk to us about either those three or anyone else, and what you think we would need to do in a centre-back position.
Yeah, I'm not one of these Football Manager software lads that know all the players from other teams, so I'm definitely not the right person to comment too broadly on it. But I think the West Brom lad, we've definitely kind of been around him and looked at him, and I think that could be an option. And he's supposed to be highly rated, but I think a lot of people thought he was left-footed, but I've seen some stuff and chatted to some West Brom people that seem to think that actually he's right-footed, so that potentially could be an interesting option. Gilchrist, yeah, I wonder with him whether, what I would say is if Japhet goes, there'll be a lot of pressure on the recruitment team. There'll be a lot of pressure just because we've sold him and, he's a star player. There'll be a lot of pressure because we need to replace him with somebody pretty good in whatever position we choose to do that in. And there'll be a lot of pressure because I think we'll need to make a marquee signing to kind of quell any discontent from the fans. So that could drive us towards someone like a Gilchrist that's, I haven't particularly watched him greatly other than the games where he's played in the Championship. And that could lead us to somebody like him that already seems to be a bit of a fan's favourite when most people haven't actually watched him at all. So, yeah, that's a possibility, I think. What I would say is that if you're going to replace Jaff, and Jake's still going to be your left centre back, I personally would be looking for somebody who's super quick. I'd want somebody very pacey, which is possibly where Tristan could come in and make a difference. I think physically moving inside to centre back in the Championship over a longer period of time, he'll need time to adjust because it is a different role and you do get absolutely battered at centre back, which you don't really get at full back. And the intensity of that is just different to playing for Exeter or wherever else he's been. But I would probably like somebody really quick next to Jake to help him kind of be his best and have that sort of sweeper role to get in behind him when the opposition do get in behind him, basically.
Yeah, and arguably someone who's fairly comfortable with the ball at their feet, which I think Japhet is, and Tristan is as well. So again, it provides an interesting argument as to where Tristan fits in. But Dan, are you able to comment on any of the names I mentioned, or anyone else you think could be a good fit if we were to go down replacing like for like at centre back?
So as Phil said, so Caleb Taylor is definitely someone I think in the past that is known to us. Gilchrist, I haven't heard anything on that, but I get the logic behind it. My only concern with Gilchrist, and again, I'm not pretending I'm an expert on Alfie Gilchrist. In terms of right back, I don't get the impression that he is of the same profile as how Tristan plays. So would he be? Although he'd be good at, he's obviously good on the ball. He's been at Chelsea. Come through the academy. You don't do that if you're not comfortable with the football. But would he be the right fit for how we want that player in that position to play? I'm not ultra convinced, but then could you have an argument of bringing him inside and leaving Tristan there? It's going to be interesting. In terms of replacements, I'm not heard anything, in terms of personnel, but judging off those three, obviously, Taylor, would they potentially go back to that? Obviously, profile-wise, with what we're looking for in signings now, he'd probably fit the bill. The same with Gilchrist, although I've just questioned whether he's that profile of right back. So those two, I get the logic there. But I think Phil's right. There's going to be, there's going to be pressure because, we've got other positions as well. I think we're still a body light in midfield. If we're going to play two up top and you've got Mihailo, Josh Coburn, obviously Macaulay Langstaff started the season with a goal. Kevin Nisbet, is he going to come back in? Is he not? If not, do you need another striker there? Do you want to go with four? I'd say probably ideally you do. So there's a lot of work to be done. I think if Japhet does go, obviously time isn't on our side, and I don't think that's particularly. Maybe that's not anything to worry about as of right now, because obviously, we've shown an appetite to bring players in the last transfer window. I know we haven't seen a lot of them, but it's not that we've not done a lot of business. The question will be now, well, the pressure is you've got to get the business right. It's no good bringing in 6 players that we don't see until the second half of the season. I think ideally we need players in for the here and now for the first team. And with 10, 11 days left, that's, as Phil says, that's a lot of pressure.
It is, and I still think even before Japhet, we need 2, 3. So I think there's a lot of business that needs to be done, and I do feel for the Bellersons, to be totally honest, because they pumped so much money in. Unfortunately, though, the way the Championship is going, you've got Charlton spending £10 million in this window minimum. You've got Wrexham have spent 18 million in the last week. This is not a norm. So for us to just maintain, I do think we need to spend some serious money. Just touching on Gilchrist, by the way, I just wonder if he's a bit of a tweener, a bit like a Callum Styles, where he's a right back, he's a centre back, he can play in a few different positions, but actually, is he really now down to play in one position, and what his physical profile is like, to your point there, Dan. But let's touch on kind of just to wrap up Japhet going in, and we can maybe touch on what we think we need to do in the next 10 days to close out. But what kind of message does it send to both the fans and the players if Japhet was to leave?
I guess the players in the group will probably know to some degree that this was likely to happen. I don't know how much information players share with each other about their personal business, but the rest of the squad are just like us. They'll have seen the release fee, they'll know the details within reason, they'll work stuff out for themselves just like we do, and they probably have a little bit more information than we do. So, you'd think they kind of half expected it to happen. And could see it coming. I think if you're Ivanovic, for example, and you're getting a lot of interest and you're seeing, the best player at the other end of the pitch go, I don't know whether it can't make you feel like our chances of reaching the top 6 have improved. And, I guess also then what does it say to players that we're trying to approach? The model, whether you like the model or not, or whether you like selling Japhet or not, this is the model, and we have to accept this is how they're going to work. But this is the vagaries of it, which is suddenly you get a great player and he's gone before you've, in the blink of an eye. And the same happened with Romain Esse, and that is where it's at, and it puts a huge amount of pressure on the recruitment team, because getting it right is really, really difficult. Getting it right every 3 or 6 months you're selling a player is even more difficult. So I think that's a really tough aspect of it. In terms of the fans, I mean, we really only think about things emotionally. We'll get some interesting views kind of with people a little bit more commercially who are kind of thinking about the numbers, but we just think, hang on a minute, 6 weeks ago we were kind of nailed on for a top 6 spot. We've had a suddenly bad result with Borough, and then our best centre back for however many years is off, and it all suddenly looks doom and gloom. It's down to the club to sign good enough players to come in and fill those voids and make it a relatively seamless transition. To Dan's point, I think we often sign players that aren't quite ready, and what I mean by that, they're either not quite ready because they haven't played at this level, or they're not quite ready because they've been on the fringes of their team and therefore they haven't had a pre-season, or they're not currently in the first team, so they take 4-6 weeks to get up to speed. If Jaff goes, we can't really afford to have a player in that position, or someone like Alfie Doughty who's come in not quite yet fully fit, and then we've kind of probably stress loaded him and pinged a hamstring. We just can't be in that position for the centre back role, I don't think.
No, it begs the question: who's going to play on Saturday if Japhet's not playing? What do? Do you bring Tristan inside and Leonard? But again, I think that just highlights just how short of bodies we are at the back, to be totally honest. So, in terms of bodies, Dan, what we got 10, 11 days to go. What do we need?
Obviously, basing this on Japhet leaving, I think another centre back is a given. I think I'm probably more pro leaving Kramer where he is. That might divide opinion, but it depends on outgoings, doesn't it? Because like we've said, if we want another player of that profile to do the same job he does, do you look at another right back? You had a good suggestion with a similar move to like the Zach Sturge coming in last year. Midfield, I think we're light. If you look at the personnel who left, I'd like to see another midfielder. And again, I go back to the forwards. It depends. There's so much. There's 10 days left, and when I don't think anyone's really too sure what in terms of Kevin Nisbet, he's sort of a wild card, isn't he? I think Ivanovic and Coburn will be the preferred two if we're going to play the two, which I'm working on the assumption we will. Then you've got Langstaff, Nisbet. I saw today Alex Neil said about getting him, some minutes in his legs in the 21s, but really it's coming up to decision time. Does he want to be here? Do we want him, sort of thing? So we've got to make a decision there. So yeah, I would say you're looking at 3, maybe 4 before the deadline. If Japhet goes out the door, I don't know what you guys think in terms of areas. If you'd agree with that sort of analogy.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, go on, Chris.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, I would. I'll raise you. I think we need 5. I think that if Japhet goes, I think we need 2 centre backs if we're going to replace the centre back, because ultimately, if Tristan's going to be a right back, who plays centre back? There isn't. If you then bring in, you're only replacing Japhet. You're not then looking at who could come in and keep and maintain of a certain level. All we have really is Kamal Grant, who is very untested at this level. Or you move Wes or Ryan inside, that's not really their forte. So for me, I think we need 2 centre backs. I would do a Zach Sturge right back signing, like a right wing back. I think we need to invest in a central midfielder. I understand the model, but for me, Saturday was crying out for someone to grab the game by the scruff of the neck and to be that man in the centre of the park. I've said it for donkeys that I want Lewis Travis. I know it's not going to happen, but someone of that ilk. And then I think we need some pace up front, to be totally honest. Offer us something a little bit different. I like Sinclair Armstrong. There's a lot of things he's not very good at, but there's some things that he's very, very good at, and we don't have those in our side. So I think we need 5, and 5 in 11 days is tough. But that's my opinion. Phil, I cut you off, mate. What's your opinion?
No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, you can look at it this way and say 5 in 11 days is tough, but I think if you go back to January, didn't we sign 6 on the last day or something? I can't remember now.
Yeah, but how many of them actually came in and
I'm not making any comment on that. I'm not going there. Yeah, I've made that point on various ways. Yeah, look, I'm with you. I think I'm not sure whether you need 2 centre backs, but you definitely need 1. The problem with bringing 2 in is if you're going to bring in good quality centre backs, they want to play, and if signing, like the lad at West Brom, I think one of the risks of bringing somebody like that in, to bring them in at the sort of money they're on and the kind of wages you'd have to pay for them to sit on the bench, is probably not economically a great idea. So, I think that's a little bit of a challenge there. Midfield, absolutely agree with you. Billy and Casper, really like them, but you need a different option, but you also need rotation. We're seeing it more and more with our players. They're getting overplayed, getting injuries. And as a club, we're probably failing them a little bit by not having the right options to kind of rotate and rest people. Up front, there's no point in commenting too much about who might go, because everyone's got different views on that. But we do lack pace. It could be Idemo, and Idemo could be the Sinclair Armstrong type player, but he has just blown a little bit too hot and cold. And I think what was really interesting is I went to Newport, and second half he was kind of unplayable, obviously against a much lower level team, but he was pretty much unplayable. And then on Saturday we were struggling in the game, and the manager didn't feel like bringing him on until the 79th minute. So from the outside, I'd be thinking he's had such a great game, and that second half, I'd have wanted him on at 55, 65 minutes to try and make something happen. But the manager didn't. So I don't know what that sort of tells us, whether that's a trust thing or whether there's a little injury or what. But we definitely, I think up front, in the same way we need pace at the back, I think we've got to have somebody who, just get us out of trouble at the other end, where we can play the ball in behind and they've got that blistering pace to get onto stuff. It worked really well in the, I think it was the Norwich game, wasn't it, where Alfie Doherty played that ball and Langstaff got through. That really wasn't so much about Langstaff's pace. That was more about the quality of the ball that was played to him and his timing of his run. But if you have got blistering pace, the delivery of the ball can be slightly less effective than the pinpoint that Doughty played. And on the basis we're not going to have him for a while, we could probably just do with somebody that can kind of turn half chances into something a bit more significant. Yeah,
100%. And I think obviously Doughty now being out is a real shame. And then when you look at the lineup that will play on Saturday, it will basically have no new players in it other than the keeper, which we had to sign, right? And it's kind of like, this is where we've got a lot of business to do in 11 days. I know Sturge and Coburn, but ultimately they were here last year is the way I look at it. So, but having said that, I don't think there's any need for us to panic. I think, as you said earlier, Phil, quite right, most football fans think emotionally first. And we've had when you think about it, a week of trio of bad news, a really poor result at home to Middlesbrough, Alfie Doughty getting injured for an extended period, and then potentially have one of our, if not our best players going. So it's been an emotional week. I think to bring it all back and summarise, it's now, what do we do next? What do we do with the money if it comes in? And what does the next 11 days look like, which I think could shape our season quite significantly. So that's my overall wrap. But gents, I'll come to you one more time for any final thoughts, starting with yourself, Dan. Anything else you want to add before we close out?
I think what Phil said earlier actually is, and you just repeated there, is probably a really good way to finish up. It's about what comes next, isn't it? Like, get both sides of the arguments with Japhet possibly going, but I think, like I said, I think it's probably the right option. There's been sort of rumblings all summer, and I don't think Sheffield United's interest is anything new. So I think most fans probably sort of expected we might come to this point. The timing's a little bit of a sickener, but like I said, it's a bit of an anomaly with that clause, because someone could have come in at 10 o'clock on the last day and paid peanuts for him. So it's a shame, but it's about what comes next. It's down to the club to go out and sort of make sure that absence isn't felt. And I think looking at whether you agree on the deals or whether you rate the players coming in, one thing you can't knock at the minute is the club's intent. I think they've gone out, they've spent money, and I think they will go and do again. So let's see what's next.
Yeah. Look, I think Jaff was always here for a good time, not a long time. So, I think we just have to respect that and thank him for kind of like, giving us a good year and a half. If it happens at this level they're talking about, then we've made some good money. And I think that also sends a bit of a signal to other players that maybe have been in a similar place to him, that you can come to us, rehabilitate your career and create a platform to move on, we just have to kind of go with that, you know. But yeah, I good player. Really enjoy watching him play. Be sad to see him go, but that's kind of happened forever and a day at Millwall. So, you know, probably nothing new.
No, and as you say, something we'll probably need to get used to with the model, and something that hopefully long term will get us to where we want to be as a football club. So let's see. But yeah, big 10, 11 days. Of course, if you're listening to us for the first time, give us a like, give us a subscribe. We really appreciate everything we do is for cancer research. And we're going to do our best to keep you updated with all of the news and transfers and bits and pieces that undoubtedly will unfold over the next 10, 11 days. Thanks very much for listening. Thank you, gents, for coming on.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, Chris. Cheers.
Thank you. And we'll see you on the next one. As always, bye for now.
Hi, it's Steve Morrison here, and you're listening to Chat with Chaps, chatting Millwall, come rain or shine.